we know about Elisha? He's probably a younger guy at this point in his life. But what we know about him is he's got money. He's well off. At least it might be family money, but some kind of generational wealth for sure. But he has all the ancient world status symbols. He's got plows, he's got cattle, he's got land. So he's a man of great means. He also apparently has some leisure time on his hands, because typically you would outsource this job of plowing the fields to your workers, but he is doing the work himself. And so he's a man who apparently has time. He's a man who apparently has money, but he does not have purpose yet. He's looking for something. Because when the cloak hits his back, there's this is why I'm in the world. This is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And he has money, but he doesn't have purpose. Money is great, but it cannot give you purpose. Money can accomplish a lot of things, but really what money can do for you, its main use is it increases your options in life. That's really what it does. If you have a little bit of money, you have very few options in terms of what car you can buy. If you have a lot of money, you have a lot of options in terms of what car you can buy, and that applies to anything and everything. Money can increase your options, but it cannot increase your sense of purpose. It cannot tell you why you're in the world. The same is true for leisure. You can have all the time in the world, and you can be relaxed. You can be in a hammock in Tahiti. But if you do not have purpose, you are going to be like Elisha, wondering, what am I supposed to do? I wish a cloak would hit my back so I knew the meaning of my days and why I'm in the world. What am I called to? And in this particular moment, the cloak hits his back, and what is happening? He's being called out of a life of prosperity. He's being called out of a life of status. And he's essentially being called into a life of being a vagabond and a wanderer, and into a life of poverty. And he celebrates this. In fact, he throws a party. He kills the cattle. A lot of T-bone steaks would be served at this particular celebration. You've got 24 cattle or so at least that are killed. So this is an enormous feast that he's going to throw because he's excited, because he's leaving behind a life where he didn't quite know what to do with himself, and he had money, but he did not know why he was in the world. And it's a moment where he recognizes, I have not been thrown into the world, I've been called into the world by God, and I know what I'm supposed to do with my life. And so he wakes up to that, and there's an eagerness, there's a sense of expectancy, even though he knows what it means. And it's an odd story. If you read through it, verse 20, it says that Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. I really like this Elijah guy, by the way. You sort of get a picture for what he does here. He just walks up, throws the cloak, and then apparently just walks off. It says Elisha has to run after him. And then he's like, hey, can I kiss my mom and dad goodbye? I mean, this is a big moment here. And what does he say? I love this. He's kind of like a grumbly old prophet. I like this. He says, go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? What did I do to you? Well, you put the cloak on me. He says, no. What did I do to you? Well, what does he mean by that? Well, it's actually pretty simple what he means by that. What he means by it is, I didn't pick you. You're not my guy. I would have never chosen you as successor. You're God's choice. I didn't put the cloak on your back. God put the cloak on your back. And I think we all have a tendency in our lives. If I were to say, hey, what do you do for work, or what do you do with your time? You might say, well, I sell insurance. And if I say, well, why do you sell insurance? Well, because my dad sold insurance, and when I was in my 20s, he offered me a part of the business, and here I am in my 50s, I'm still doing this. And you would tell the story in such a way, my father put the cloak on my back. It was not your dad who put the cloak on your back. It's God who chooses what you do. It's God who puts that calling on your life. If I said, well, what do you, well, I work in this particular industry, and Well, why do you work there? Well, because there were 30 applicants and my boss chose me. It was my boss. It was Qualcomm who put this cloak on my back. That's why I do what I do. It was not your boss who put the cloak on your back. It's God who puts the cloak on your back. The New Testament says this over and over again, that we don't work for man, we work for God. He's the one who assigns. And when we recognize that, all of a sudden the most mundane thing of vocation becomes a purposeful, even if it's not the thing we're in the world to do, we recognize there's something in this that's connected to what I'm supposed to do with my life, and it's all part of the process God's using, and he's calling me to something. He's doing something through all of this. God puts the cloak on your back. He calls you to something in your life, specifically that he wants you to do, whether you ever get a paycheck for it or not, whether you're in your 70s or whether in your teenage years. He has a destiny. He wants you, if there's still breath in your lungs, a cloak he wants you to wear. You say, well, that sounds great. How do I discover that? Well, I think there's a lot of ways. There certainly were a lot of ways that I think Elijah steps into this moment. One way you recognize your cloak is crisis may reveal it to you. It could be a crisis in your family. That was certainly true for Elisha in this moment. To read the whole story in context, it's an enormous moment of crisis for the nation of Israel. And Elisha knows that. He knows that the fate of worship to Yahweh is hanging in the balance with what happens. And so where everybody else just sees chaos and threat, he sees opportunity. And he steps into the crisis with this cloak on his back going, I have been called to this. And it might be that for you in this moment, it could be a crisis with your family. It could be a crisis with one of your kids. And for you, you're going, I know God's calling me to this. I'm going to put this cloak on in this stage, this season. And I'm going to step into this fully because I know God's calling me to this moment in this crisis. It could be in your job, in your industry, in the middle of the COVID shakeup. Everybody else sees threat. Everybody else is on LinkedIn looking for a way out. But in your industry, you don't see all the threats. You see the opportunity. And you have this ability to look back at jobs in your 20s or your 30s and you go, somehow I am perfectly prepared for this moment. And what everyone else is cursing, you're celebrating the cloak because the crisis has revealed the destiny, the thing that you are supposed to do. It could be criticism that reveals the cloak. It's the thing that you're willing to take some heat for. And you didn't know you were willing to take some heat for it until somebody criticized it. And then you're like, wait a second, I'm willing to step in the arena. I'm willing to have some tomatoes thrown at me to do this. And that was certainly true for Elisha. This would not be something everybody would have necessarily understood. Imagine his parents are wealthy. They've got to go to dinner parties and talk about their rich friends' kids. Well, what's your son up to? Well, hey, we haven't seen Elisha around in a while. What's he doing? Oh, do you remember that grumbly old prophet who stumbled into town one day? He's valeting for him. That's what he's doing. Isn't he in his 40s now? Yes, but he knew this is what he was supposed to do. Sometimes the criticism, what you're willing to take some heat for, reveals the calling that God has for your life. It could be your curiosity reveals your calling. Oftentimes that idea of calling is so mystical or mythical, as if God's going to whisper to us exactly when and where to apply or what to do with our lives. But it's often our curiosity, the things that we're the most curious about. It could be finance or fashion, but it causes us to focus in on something, and that curiosity reveals to us what we are supposed to do with our life. But when we recognize it, when we realize it, there should be some kind of a moment of celebration of going, there's a cloak on my back. And it might be something in your life currently that you're cursing, but the thing you're cursing is actually the calling. It's the cloak. You go, I'm supposed to wear this smelly thing? I'm supposed to put this on? And for Elisha in this moment, what everybody else might see as a curse, or what everyone else might look at and say, well, that's a gross cloak, he actually sees it as a cape. And it's a superpower. And it might not be what someone else wants to do with their life, but it's what he wants to do with his life, and he knows that he's been called to it. And it's a moment of great feasting, and it's a moment of great celebration, because he knows, I was not thrown into the world. I was called into the world by God. And that's true for any and every single one of us in this room. When you step into the presence of Jesus, you're not thrown into this world. You've been called into this world by God. And there is a reason you are here.